Alright guys, give me just a second trying to pull the list together. So let's drop the link so everybody has it. Then I'll dive into chart views real quick. Just a minute. Alright. Drop the link into a couple of the Discords. Let me switch over here. List of tickers that people were asking about. Also, I'll look at the options data on the other screen here and let you know what I'm seeing. And just for context, since Tony was asking about it yesterday, I leave pre-market on and aftermarket or extended hours on my charts because I like to see the reference levels, especially if I'm trading something intraday. I like to see the support and resistance levels throughout the day that were the high and low from pre-market. I don't necessarily use that for anything except for kind of just being aware of it. I don't draw my patterns based off of pre-market patterns or levels. I specifically draw my patterns based off of intraday levels. Let's see. I'm going to start with Tesla. Y'all know what I've been saying on Tesla for a few weeks now, right? So same thing, especially this top zone here. The orange rectangle you see, that's one of the ranges I really like to sell covered calls against shares, and I make a lot of profit doing so. So right now, yeah, look, we pushed out at the downtrend on the longer term yet again, right? But waiting for confirmation on the weekly, monthly, and the follow-through candles. So just because we closed out the end of last month, which was 3 days ago, right there above it, we also have multiple data events. So yesterday we had delivery numbers which came in lacking, and we rejected hard off that. We've done some retracement, it looks like, but then you can see we're likely going to reject some more. Note that over here back in July we saw a similar really hard tank and then kind of leveled out, but then we consolidated and traded relatively range bound until earnings, and then it tanked. I'm not saying it tanks at earnings, I'm saying be careful. With robotax event next week and then earnings following that, you want to be very careful. Do not do anything crazy. We did start phasing into a swing put on Tesla because I saw that some of the whales were actually positioning heavier for downside movement. I don't know if they're expecting lacking results into Q4 and Q1 as a result of like the delivery numbers as an indication or what, but still selling covered calls on it and also easing into that swing put for January. So watching the levels right now, I want to see what it does today and tomorrow, especially as you look over here at the weekly, for instance. You can see that like very similar, right? So yeah, that was a big green push up, but that's why you wait for a confirmation candle. Because if this doesn't signify and push up higher and we don't close the week above that 252 level, then this basically will get invalidated and probably drop back down pretty hard based off what you can see here, here, and here. Like this range is not kind to Tesla, okay? As much as I'm bullish on the stock longer term, whenever it's in this range where we're at right now, between basically 250 and 300, if it rejects hard. So keep an eye on that. Be very careful if you are swinging anything, especially careful if you're swinging calls of any kind. So right now the premiums are still really jacked on both sides. So I went with the January puts just because they're relatively cheap for the price. They're out of the money right now, but they're still within trading range by expiration. Also, they don't have to go into the money to actually be profitable. So just something to keep in mind. Let me look real quick at the list that we've got here that people are wanting me to look at. So yeah, here I'll just start from the top with SPY and QQQ. SPY is still in that upper range of its breakout, right? So be curious to see what happens here. A lot of the movements you've seen on SPY and QQQ are coming from NVDA and others. NVIDIA got that nice little pump yesterday in aftermarket because the CEO had a CNBC interview, and it basically people bought into the hype around him saying that the demand for Blackwell chips has been ridiculously high, which is the same thing we've known for months. So just be careful today, especially with NVIDIA, because I'll show you here in a second. We'll look into the chart after I look at SPY real quick. But like SPY, it's consolidating in this zone. We could see a continuation of the breakout if it can push up higher with some momentum and volume. But at the moment, it's kind of just playing within that same range. So we see a rejection below this level here, which was the previous highs. It's going to get rough. Just be careful. Like always, QQQ and SPY are being driven by the underlying stocks that make up its major weighting. So if I look over here, for instance, at NVIDIA, which has got a lot going on right now, sorry for the busy chart, but we're trading multiple time frames on it. So one thing I'm watching on the larger time frame, we'll look at that real quick, just as a reminder. It's a larger time frame, right? Downtrend, and we rejected there. You can see we rejected there yet again on the downtrend. It's also started to form this head and shoulders pattern over here on this side, which probably move this over a little bit just to make it cleaner. And someone asked about it the other day. A head and shoulders, technically, all that's required for head and shoulders is a high, a low, and then a higher high, similar low. It doesn't have to be exact. This is just a clean one, similar to Microsoft has a really clean head and shoulders going on it. But they can be lopsided or angled or anything. Ultimately, all you have to have is a lower high, a high, and a lower low. Or I'm sorry, a lower high following, right? So unless this high goes above that head high, then this is still a valid head and shoulders pattern. So if we push higher and break out above the head, it's invalidated. Or indeed. Keep an eye on that with NVIDIA. I'm watching though to show you what we do with the head and shoulders for one, but also this pattern that we got going on here. So there's a downtrend, which you can see it a bit easier probably. Oh, we're not going to use the daily. We'll use 4 hour. You can see that there's this downtrend, which it looks like we broke out of in after hours and pre-market. Again, I don't put a lot of emphasis on pre-market and after hours movement because it's so low volume, which look at the volume candles right here. They did that movement, right? So if we reject back underneath that trend during active trading hours, I'll keep watching that trend. I need to go look at the options flows for NVIDIA to see what's up over there. If I see a big chunk of covered calls being sold this morning, that's my indication, especially if they're large well trades, that they probably expected to reject hard yet again off that level. So I might add some puts if I see that rejection in this range, just because I've been selling covered calls, which I haven't bought to close them yet. They're up nicely. We sold them between 122 and 125. So those are doing well. You can see it's already trying to reject there at that minor resistance level, right? So again, not putting too much weight on after hours and pre-market movement. I want to see what happens after market opens today. The broader tech sector looks like it's getting slammed pretty hard at the moment. So like NVIDIA has a little bit of hype news from the CEO yesterday, but that being said, it's still right there with the rest of tech and semiconductors. If you look over SMH, for instance, which is the ETF related to semis, this is not great, right? So you've got the head and shoulders that we've been monitoring, as well as a break of the trend line here, and even on the daily, you can see it's super clear. So that technically was a break of that trend. It's more longer term, so I'm gonna make it solid. But break of trend, bounce, retest of trend, pretty much a perfect technical move from a breakdown standpoint there. So I'll be watching SMH to see what happens. We could see a similar drop to what we saw right here. I draw a minor support level right here in this range, which you can see is serving as minor support on both sides there. I'll be curious to see what happens there. If we see a breakdown below that and confirmation, it's probably going to drop down. It wouldn't surprise me to see that 212.40 gap get filled that's never been filled. So keep an eye on that. I'm not trading it directly, but using it more for indication of trading some of the other semiconductor stocks, because this basically catches all of those. So if I look over AMD really quick, you can see here, no, I don't want notifications. You can see here that it's trying to reject back into that downtrend. So looking at the daily, yesterday it started to reject and it kind of wicked after that breakout attempt. But what I'm looking for is to see how it handles that retest. So normally from a technical breakout standpoint, you get the breakout of the downtrend, you would want to see the retest of that trend line and then a solid bounce with volume and momentum to the upside, which is your entry for calls. Once you have that confirmation of the breakout on the daily candles and hopefully in a larger time frame trend like this on the weekly candles, but you don't enter calls hoping for the breakout like a lot of people did over in here, because then you get wrecked and they decay unless you're trading something that's leaps, which I don't really recommend a lot of leap options right now, just because if the Fed keeps cutting interest rates through on those options, it's going to hurt the premium. So it's not going to work the same as what it did back in like 2022, 2023, especially 2023, 2024, where the Fed is actually, increasing interest rates, which increased the row impact for those options and increased the premiums. You have the opposite effect going on once they start cutting rates. So where people were used to just buying leap calls in 2023 and 2024 and working out okay, I'm not saying it can't, but you definitely need to take into consideration the impact that row can have on it. So keeping an eye on that. Saw if there was just news that Tesla is pushing ahead with the plans for introducing Cybertruck batteries by the middle of next year. I'll believe it when I see it. And I again, still bullish long term on Tesla. Just they have a tendency, especially Elon, to overcommit on timelines and then miss those dates. So circling back AMD here, watching those levels to see what happens. Especially since it's Thursday and we can get weekly options for cheap. I might trade calls or puts on something like AMD if I see the right move, which I'll alert it if I see it. But you have potential bull flag setup going on there as well. So yeah, we'll see how that breaks out or what it does, and I'll keep an eye on it. What other tickers were y'all wanting to see? So Apple, yeah. Apple's in an interesting place, and I saw that the CEO just sold a bunch more shares. So you look at Apple, it's got this overall what looks like a bull flag going on, but then it kind of invalidated it. So it's trying, or was trying, I should say, it was trying to hold that support level there. When we look here, Apple's likely going to go ahead and tag that gap fill at 222.68. So I'm probably going to trade some Apple puts today or tomorrow. I'm going to look for the confirmation of the break before I jump in them. But Apple options, especially if you get in at the right spot, can very easily be those like 300% bangers that we've seen before. So keeping an eye on that, because those are really awesome trades to jump in and they're cheap. So I can risk to reward it and ride it out, see what happens. But yeah, you can see this level and this range is not kind to Apple normally. So keep an eye on that to see what happens. I'll delete this just because it's in the way right now, but we failed to push up and get the confirmation on that breakout, so I'm not sure that we'll actually push to that level or not. We could. I'm going to delete it for now and I'll redraw it once I see confirmation to the upside for us. That way there's not confusion. But today I'm watching these levels of support and resistance on it to see what happens. See here, like especially if we get in at 225 on some cheap like expiration tomorrow options, even a $3 move will make those options just skyrocket. So that's why it makes sense sometimes to enter certain types of trades without like really detailed confirmation on a larger time frame. You're trading an option costs like $30, but your gain like potential from that option could be hundreds of dollars. For me, it's worth it. Might not be worth it for others, but I would alert something like that as a lotto because of the higher risk. It does also have a bit of a bear flag forming here, and I mean just from that standpoint, the measured move would conservatively be like 3.5%, which is like wrong indicator. So 3.5%, which I'm doing this conservatively. Normally, the bottom of the flag is where I would draw this from, but I'm gonna draw it up here because I'm gonna do it really conservatively. So, you can see that's less than 3.5%, but that would put around that 217 range, which, surprisingly enough, happens to be the same range they broke down to these previous times. Okay, see how the technicals work. Also, that double top there's not great, but watching this, if I see the break, especially below that minor resistance level, I'll probably enter some puts. I'd trim them at the next support or it gains, period. If something's at 5% or more, be smart, set a stop loss. 5% gains is better than 50% loss, so don't be greedy. Other tickers, yeah, Microsoft. So Microsoft has this big, ugly head and shoulders pattern that's actually ridiculously clean on its chart. So watching that, you can see that's a pretty large selling volume that we got going on there as well. You definitely want to be careful here on Microsoft because if it plunges, especially if it cracks that 417 support, it dives to at least like 404. So I might enter some Microsoft puts with the confirmation today. We'll see. I want to see what happens on the levels. Any other tickers that are on the list real quick? Got Palantir. Yeah, I got you. So same thing we've been watching, right? Which we re-entered some calls on this support tap, and they rocketed and gave us more great gains. So Palantir, watching the same thing, especially if it can hold that support. That's great. We can see the push up to that 45 range. That was a nice solid green. That's a bullish engulfing candle actually on yesterday's daily, so that's a positive sign. Bull flag is still intact. We didn't break down below that, so yeah, that's actually still a good setup for bullish continuation. One thing to keep in mind, I'm not saying it's make or break for it, but Apple and Palantir have very strong ties, so if Apple does get slammed, you might see a little bit of an impact to Palantir as a result of that. But that being said, Palantir serves as a wartime stock as well, and with all the increased tensions right now in the Middle East, the wartime stocks, and especially cybersecurity related ones, they tend to do well, which is why you see things like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and others ripping this week with the news at the global level. So definitely still in long-term calls here, long-term shares here. I haven't sold covered calls against these shares just because Palantir has such a bullish setup that it could keep ripping, and I don't want to get stuck in those calls or those covered calls getting assigned on this just because it doesn't make sense for me for how much premium I would get. It's a bit different than selling premiums on something like Tesla or NVDA, where you get a significant premium and it's very volatile on the drops to where I can just buy to close those positions. I'm gonna look at GameStop real quick just because there were some options in the flow the other day that were interesting on it. So it looks like it invalidated that bull flag. Well, arguably it could have not, but you could consider this the support for the bottom of the flag. But anyways, I'm gonna delete it. So you've got on GameStop here, which I know it's more of a meme stock than a technical stock, but the technicals matter. So this is the second breakout attempt here. We'll see how this plays out, similar to the example I showed earlier. You look for breakout, retest, continuation, right? So on GameStop, I want to see whether or not it bounces and goes up from here. Preferably, what would make sense to see a continuation of the breakout here would be a move above that 25 level. You can see that the price target that I've got marked over here for some longer term calls that we were in is going to be that 24.94 level. So watching that to see how it plays out. Also treading carefully because I know if it rejects here, it's probably going to tag that 1958 level again, which is fine. News that PayPal completes its first business transaction using stablecoin. I know we're still in some runner calls on PayPal, so I'm going to look at it real quick. Yeah, that's nice. That's real nice. It's trying to form a potential head and shoulders there, but right now you still have a bull flag going on there, so I'm going to draw that so that y'all have it. And I'm going to make it thicker so that it's easier to see. But yeah, you've got a nice little bull flag going on here. Hopefully drawing it this way helps y'all to see the patterns a bit more, but it's trying to continue upward from here. So you can see we actually entered calls right there, and it ripped, and it kept ripping. So it blew through all three of our price target levels. We'll go ahead and delete those while we're looking at it, just because we already tagged them all. But yeah, that's working out well. I want to see it hold some of the support in that range, and we'll see where it goes from there, because the upside targets from there is going to be like 88 and potentially 102, which, let's look at something real quick. So the pole itself is about, what, 17%? So if it was to get a breakout to the upside, we conservatively put it here, 17%, somewhere in that range. So you can see from that standpoint that tagging that 88 resistance would be an easy target for the breakout confirmation there on the daily candles. So I'm just going to leave this here so we have it for reference, but I would look for a breakout on that setup for more bullish continuation. Interesting, it looks like NVDA is already rejecting in pre-market. Surprise. Real quick, because y'all were asking about crypto. It's still bullish. Learn to ride the wave. Like, I know that's easier, and most of y'all know I've been in crypto since 2017, so I'm like unfazed at this point, but here, let me do this because this will help. Basically, this is your flag level on Bitcoin right now, okay? Because it's got this massive, you look at the weekly, there's a cup and handle and a bull flag going on, okay? Right? So cup and handle, we're in the handle. So this is a setup to where even though people are freaking out, like, this is a very bullish setup on multiple time frames right now. I'm gonna delete this one just because that was our shorter time frame that we're targeting. But if we draw this out, and I'm gonna draw that really high and conservative off of the high itself rather than off of these little resistance levels in between. So if you're looking at Bitcoin here for the breakout and confirmation, like, this is still good. And like I mentioned on the video the other day, I honestly wouldn't mind to see it go down here and test this 51k level again. I would add 2 calls for swing calls and longer term calls on crypto stocks with that setup, and I would probably load the boat on leveraged crypto Bitcoin 200 time multiplied leverage futures, because that's the type of setups I trade. I did the same thing right here when we caught that bounce and they ripped. I sold them really early. I should have wrote them out. That's how I add to my long-term crypto holdings. So you can see here, Bitcoin is very much still in a very bullish setup at the moment. I guess here, just so that y'all have it, I'll draw this as well. Like, Hopefully that's clear for everyone. That's a super clear bull flag. Okay. So the measured move, which I know this is venturing into territory that Bitcoin hasn't touched before, but it's like 135% gain, which actually aligns well with what people are expecting for next year, as well as what we would typically see following the halving cycles. So even if I conservatively did this, you can see like 120, 130K is within range. I know buying a whole Bitcoin doesn't make sense for people, but if Bitcoin rips, you're going to see other cryptos run with it. It's going to happen. Bitcoin dominance is there to some extent, but at the end of the day, crypto is going to rip together. You can see that there's a bit of divergence between Ethereum and Bitcoin these days, and that makes sense if you're familiar with them. They're different types of assets. They serve very different purposes. They're different type of transactional versus storage. So you still have some bullish setup going on here, or attempting to, on Ethereum, but basically, from my standpoint, once it went to proof of stake instead of proof of work, that killed a lot of the momentum that was going on with it. So I'm keeping an eye on that. I still have ETH as well, but going from Bitcoin, let me look at MicroStrategy real quick, because I know that some of y'all are still in the swing calls that we were in that hit like 460% or 470. The same thing. Think of the chart that you just saw on Bitcoin, right? Now look at this chart for MicroStrategy. Okay. Oh, super conservative lower line here. And I mean, technically, from a bull flag, bullish pennant standpoint, you would draw it at an angle rather than what I did on Bitcoin, where I drew it flat across. But let's say we're just being ultra conservative here and drawing it like that, or if you want to, you could draw it here, looking for the breakout. No, I don't want to move that. But that's on the weekly chart. So if you look at the daily here, see how we got the daily, we failed to get the confirmation because it rejected. So even if we pushed out above this level with momentum and got a confirmation candle on follow through daily, then that thing can keep on ripping. So definitely keep an eye on MicroStrategy. The options are a little bit more expensive on MicroStrategy than others, just because it's a more expensive stock. Plus, it's got a very high volatility range, so therefore the premiums are a bit more jacked. But keeping an eye on this for the breakout. If we get a rejection confirmation here, and we reject below this resistance or support level, which is at the 160 level, then I will look to potentially trade puts on it. I just hate to trade puts on it with so much bullish setup going on there, because you've got that larger time frame, you've got this shorter time frame bull flag going on right here. Don't know why that drew from that level. Let me do this. There, y'all can see that, right? So definitely keep an eye on MicroStrategy, but same thing with a lot of the other crypto stocks. Like, yeah, we pull back 5%, 3%, things like that on them, and there is a potential bear flag setup on some of these. But the thing you have to know about the crypto stocks is that they do that kind of setup a lot, and then they just absolutely rip. Is the kind of trade-off. So I phase into longer term calls on a lot of the crypto tickers. I know crypto tickers aren't for everyone, but also keep in mind that different crypto tickers make their revenue different ways. So Riot, Mara, they're both mining companies, so they mine Bitcoin and other coins. Things like Coinbase, they basically, their revenue is generated based off of them being a brokerage, so transactional volume, buying and selling, they make money. So yeah, I'm watching this on Riot because you can see that we broke out of that downtrend, we retested and we held it. So what I want to see is if we bounce there and rip to the upside. Same thing is probably going on if you look up here at Mara. Yeah. So I know some of y'all saw me jump into those really short dated calls. That was pure lotto. But here you can see we got an inverse head and shoulders going on. I'd like to see it hold that support level if it can push back above it, and then we can push up to test this level here. But the first target would be the 18 level. So watching these, not doing anything crazy at the moment, but just keep an eye on it. If you see crypto start to rip, these are things you can keep an eye on. and check real quick if there's any other tickers. If they're not, I will wrap things up since market open is here in a few minutes. But yeah, if there's any other tickers y'all want me to go through at some point today, or if you just want charts for them, shoot me a message over in one of the lounge channels or the trading floor channels, and I can put on my list to look at either later today on the video, or I'll just take the screenshot and mark the levels for you and I'll drop it into the chat itself. But anything needs anything, let me know. If not, have a great day. Make those gains.